Good morning, third grade. Our targets for today are I can identify repeated subtraction, division, story problems, and I can represent repeated subtraction, division, story problems using number lines. What do we know? Well, we know that multiplication is putting together equal-sized groups or rows to find an unknown product or total. We know that division is breaking apart a total into equal-sized groups or rows to find an unknown factor or side length. We know that inverse operations are operations that undo each other. Addition and subtraction are inverse operations. Multiplication and division are also inverse operations. We know that when we're thinking about multiplication, the product is the total amount. It's the answer to a multiplication problem. A factor is one of the numbers that you multiply to find the total product. In a division equation, the total or the product is called the dividend, and it's the first number in a division equation. It's the amount that you're dividing. The divisor is what you divide by, and the divisor is one of the factors. It is the factor you know. The quotient is the other factor. It is the answer to the division problem. When we were learning about multiplication story problem types, we learned about repeated addition multiplication. We learned that the repeated addition multiplication problem is a problem where an action repeats itself often over time. We represented repeated addition multiplication story problems with number lines, and of course we multiplied to solve them. Today we're going to learn about repeated subtraction multiplication. You're going to hear a lot of ways that repeated subtraction is very similar to repeated addition. But you're also going to hear some really important differences. So what is repeated subtraction? Well, repeated subtraction means subtracting the same number multiple or more than one times. Here you can see I took the number 8 and I subtracted 2 repeatedly. 8 minus 2 minus 2 minus 2 minus 2 equals 0. A faster way to solve a repeated subtraction problem is to divide. Repeated subtraction story problems are problems where the same action is happening again and again the same way. The same amount is being subtracted from a known total amount repeatedly. That means that you want to find out how many times something is subtracted. For example, Miss Glassy drank 35 bottles of water. If she drank 5 bottles each day, how long did it take her to drink all of the bottles of water? Well, you can see that we're trying to figure out how many times I drank 5 bottles of water. How many days did it take me to drink all the water if I was drinking 5 bottles each day? Here would be another example where I'm trying to figure out how many times an action was repeated. Noelle wants to buy 8 teddy bears. If she buys 2 per week, how many weeks will it take her to buy all 8 teddy bears? Well, the action Noelle is doing is that she's buying 2 teddy bears per week. We know she wants to buy a total of 8 teddy bears. We're trying to figure out how many times she's going to repeat that action of buying 2 teddy bears per week. Less often, third grade, we see repeated subtraction problems where you want to see how much is subtracted each time. So here would be an example of that. Miss Glassy drinks 35 bottles of water each week. How many bottles does she drink each day? Well, in this problem, we still know the total number of bottles I'm drinking, 35, and we know how often, or how many times, I should say, that I drink the bottles of water. We know that a week is 7 days, so we know that I drink 35 bottles of water total in 7 days. I know how many times I'm drinking water, I just don't know how much water I drink each day. Here would be another example of that less common repeated subtraction, where I know how long, where I know my total amount and I know the amount of time, I just don't know how much of the action occurred each time. Noelle wants to buy 8 teddy bears. If she buys the same number of teddy bears for 4 weeks, how many teddy bears should she buy each week? So again, we know the action that's repeating, Noelle's buying teddy bears, and we know that ultimately she wants to buy 8 total teddy bears. We actually also know that she's going to do that for 4 weeks. You can see that here. We just don't know how many teddy bears she's going to buy each week, assuming she buys the same number. That's what we're trying to figure out. In a repeated subtraction division problem, you will always know the total amount. That's what makes it a division problem, a repeated subtraction problem, instead of a repeated addition problem. If we didn't know the total amount, but there was still an action that was repeating again and again, well then that would be repeated addition multiplication. When there's an action repeating again and again the same way, but we do know the total, and we're trying to find either the number of times the action is repeated or the value of each action, that is a repeated subtraction problem. Repeated subtraction problems happen often in our everyday life. Remember, it is only repeated subtraction if the action is the exact same each time and the total amount is known. So let's think a little bit more about how repeated addition and repeated subtraction are different. We're going to take a look at a repeated addition multiplication equation, and we're going to look at what information we know in that problem and also what information we're trying to find out, or what information do we still need. Then we'll do the same for a repeated subtraction problem, and we'll notice some similarities and some differences. Let me grab my pen. So here's the repeated addition problem up here. On Monday, Scott read 3 pages of his book. Then on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, he also read 3 pages. How many pages did he read in all? Well, we know that every day Scott is reading 3 pages of his book, so that's the repeating action. And we also know how long he did that for, even though we have to kind of think about it a little bit. We know that he did that on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. We know that he did that for 5 days. What we're trying to find is, of course, what the question's asking. How many pages did he read in all? So, to recap, what we know is that we know how many pages he read every day, and we know the number of days. But what we still need to find out is the total pages. This is a repeated addition multiplication problem because we do not know the total. We're trying to find the total amount that the action happened. Now let's take a look at the repeated subtraction division problem. Let me grab my pen again. I'll choose a different color this time. How about green? So here's our repeated subtraction division problem. If Scott has 15 pages left in his book and he reads 3 pages each day, how many days does it take him to finish the book? Well, here we know one piece of information is that Scott has 15 pages left in his book, and we also know that he's going to read 3 pages each day. The question we're trying to find, the information that we need, is how many days does it take Scott to finish the book? So, to recap what we just found out, we know, first of all, the total number of pages Scott read. And we also know how many pages he read each day. What we do not know, what we need to find, is the number of days that he read the book. So 3rd grade, this is a repeated subtraction division problem because we know the total and we're trying to find how many days he did this for. That's how repeated addition and repeated subtraction are different. Repeated addition multiplication always has us finding the total. But if we know the total and we're trying to find either how many times the action happened or the value of each action, it is a repeated division problem. So 3rd grade, let's take what we just learned there and put it to use. Here I have 6 story problems, and some of them are repeated addition, multiplication, and some of them are repeated subtraction, division. I'm going to read the problem, and we're going to use what we now know about repeated addition and repeated subtraction, that repeated addition has us finding the total, but if it's a repeated subtraction problem, we know the total. We're going to use what we know to sort these as repeated addition, multiplication, or repeated subtraction, division. We'll do the first couple together. Jack's family has a huge yard. He helped his mom plant 12 trees. If they planted 4 trees each hour, how long did it take to finish all the planting? Well, right away I see that we know that they planted a total of 12 trees, and I'm trying to figure out how long it took them to do that. Since I know the total, 12, this is clearly repeated subtraction. Let's take a look at another one. Braylon's family set up 5 tents to camp overnight in the mountains. If there were 3 people in each tent, how many family members were there total? Immediately I noticed that the question is asking me about the total. How many were there total? That tells me that I don't know the total. I do know the repeated action, and I also know the how many times it happened. So this is clearly a repeated addition multiplication problem. Now you're going to decide for the last ones. Here we go. While playing Minecraft, Dylan can make 3 trees per minute. If he spends 6 minutes making trees, how many total trees will he make? Is that repeated addition or repeated subtraction? I agree. It's repeated addition because we do not know the total. We're trying to find the total. What about this one? Austin made 3 Lego houses every hour for 3 hours. How many Lego houses did he make? Is that repeated addition or repeated subtraction? I agree. That's also repeated addition because we're trying to find the total. What about this problem? Gabriel has set a goal of running 35 laps around the playfield. If he runs 5 laps during every recess, how many recesses will it take him to reach his goal? Ooh, here we know the total. He wants to run a total of 35 laps. So what kind of problem is this? I agree. This is a repeated subtraction problem because we know the total amount. What about this last problem? Grandma needs 10 giant cookies. She makes 2 cookies at a time on her cookie sheet. How many times will she have to use the cookie sheet? Is that repeated addition or repeated subtraction? I agree. It's repeated subtraction division because we know the total amount. Great job, 3rd grade, thinking about that with me. I can tell that we're clearly ready to use our problem-solving process to solve a story problem. Here's the repeated subtraction story problem we're going to solve. Jack's family has a huge yard. He helped his mom plant 12 trees. If they planted 4 trees each hour, how long did it take to finish all the planting? Let's go ahead and read and understand this problem. Well, what do we know? One piece of information we know is that they planted 12 trees. And the other piece of information we know is that they planted 4 trees per hour. Of course, what we need to find out, what the question is asking, is how long did it take them to finish up all the planting? We're ready for step 2. We're going to determine the problem type, although today we know it's repeated subtraction, and we're going to organize the information. So we're going to draw a number line to represent this repeated subtraction problem. We're going to put the time, or how often it happened, the hours on the top, and we're going to put the action, trees planted, on the bottom. Since we know there were a total of 12 trees planted, we're going to go ahead and show all 12 trees on the bottom of the number line, like that. Do note that I started at 0 and went all the way to 12. Now, after 0 hours, they haven't planted, of course, any trees at all. So after 0 hours, they have no trees planted. But then their first hour happens. And we know that they plant 1, 2, 3, 4 trees in an hour. So you can see I made that jump. Plant 4 trees. Then plant 4 trees. Then the next hour happened. And we know the next hour they planted 4 as well. Well, 4 more trees planted would be 8 total trees. But we know they planted a total of 12. So then another hour happened. And after 3 hours, oh, look at that, they've planted all 12 trees. So it took them 3 hours to plant all the trees. We're going to go ahead and graph this information as well. We know that the total number of trees planted is 12 trees. So that will be the area of the rectangle that I graph. We also know the factor 4 trees each hour. We know that's how many they planted each hour, but we don't know how many hours they did that for. So you can see I've added that to my graph. Thankfully, when we drew our number line, it showed us that it actually took them 3 hours to plant all the trees if they could plant 4 trees each hour. So we're going to go ahead and draw a 4 by 3 rectangle because that has an area of 12. If all of these squares represent all of the trees planted, what does just one of those squares represent? I respectfully agree. It represents 1 tree planted. Now, I want you to look back at the question in the story problem. What exactly is it we're trying to find out here? Oh yes, that's right. How many hours it took to plant all the trees. Now 3rd grade, we're ready to solve this problem. We're going to choose an operation and solve it. Of course, you know that because this is a repeated subtraction division problem, we're going to divide to solve it. So think with me. What is the divisor in our division equation? What is the total amount? Oh, that's right. 12 total trees planted is the total amount. And what is our divisor going to be? What are we dividing that dividend 12 by? Oh, I agree, by 4 trees planted each hour. And that's, of course, going to tell us n, the number of hours. We're going to think about 12 divided by 4 as a multiplication equation. 12 times 4 equals 12 equals 4 times n. So what would n equal? That's right, n equals 3. An excellent answer to the question, how long did it take to finish all the planting, might be, it took 3 hours to finish all the planting. We're ready for the final step in our problem-solving process. We're going to look back and check. How do we know that our answer, 3 hours, is correct? Well, how do we know 12 divided by 4 equals 3 is correct? We know 12 divided by 4 equals 3 is correct because 4 times 3 is a fact we know, and it equals 12. Awesome job solving this repeated subtraction problem with me today, 3rd grade. Have a great day.